total destruction. And if I began there, I can make some headway into what the assignment calls for. I can see the three lectures being strung together or one leading into the other. In the first lecture, the author's argument or point of view has to do with teaching English or proper grammar to school children. It starts out talking about a waterfall and two different individuals and how they perceive it. In using the waterfall analogy, the author speaks of feelings, and I wondered at this point what this has to do with teaching English. One summary I came across tells me that Lewis points out that the authors of the English textbook are making a philosophical rather than a grammatical point. The title of the piece is Men Without Chests. I wondered where the title came from, or where it would lead me, especially when the topic in the lecture was English grammar. Later in the summary, I discovered that the chest was in fact symbolic of the heart, that the head as the intellect and the belly as the instinct. It made sense when I read that the head or the intellect governs the belly or the instinct through the chest, the heart. And again I ask, what has this to do with English grammar and the teaching of it to school children? But the summary brings the tale into the picture near the conclusion. It can be defined as a set of all objective or real value judgments about all things. And this is where I believe C.S. Lewis finds the philosophical rather than a grammatical point. By the time we get to the section lecture The Way, we find Professor Lewis leaning into his Christian belief system. When speaking of dying for one's country as an obvious moral good that everyone agrees on, I find this running parallel to Jesus dying to save mankind. In his mention of a quote from Confucius, he is displaying the obvious absurdity of anything other than the truth of Christianity. As we wind our way to the third and final lecture, The Abolition of Man, I think Professor Lewis is ready to leave us to our own truth. He points out that man's conquest of nature really means when man has obtained full control over himself. Human nature will be at the last part of nature to surrender to man. In a nutshell, man's final conquest of nature has proven to be the abolition of man. And so, nature is dictating our every move and action from the beginning. If we move outside of the tale, which were introduced to in the end of the first lecture and expanded upon in the second, man will ultimately be destroyed by nature. Being ruled by the head or the belly, man will find himself in trouble. In letting his heart rule as it was intended in the beginning, he will be led to goodness. Our instructions ask us to address what is helpful or unhelpful, problematic or unclear about the author's arguments and main points. I'm not sure I clearly stated what Professor Lewis's points and arguments are. And looking back at the copyright of this publication, and that being in 1947, I feel that thoughts and ideas during this time period were lofty and unclear on purpose. This was, and to some extent still is, a male-dominated discipline. The brotherhood of men only was alive and well. And although C.S. Lewis has proven to be a benchmark among philosophers and theologians, I can't help but wonder how well he or his ideas would succeed in the 21st century. In spite of all that I've written in regard to accepting or rejecting the point I believe the author was trying to make, I do accept his argument, as I understand it. His argument has to do with man recognizing his frailties, his faults, and the need for a heart of goodness. As we live, if we don't follow the way as it is laid out before us, we will find ourselves on a road to destruction. And that, my friend, would lead to the abolition of man. I'm not sure I would agree with the manner in which he chose to deliver it. And to think they're still using it today. Thank you.